Okay, so hello and welcome to VR underwater fishing. I'm just going to give you a quick introduction on the latest test. You can see the swim here at Sandbeds Lake. Over in the distance towards the island you can see the four big rocks. The camera has been placed about a rod length and a half, just short of that. This is the image when the camera first went in. This was Tuesday evening. That is, I think it went in about 6 o'clock in the evening. This is 20 to 8 at night. And the theory was that this looked like a good kind of patrol route between that weed that you can see. Obviously the fish is cruising right along that slot. There's an island directly behind that. I thought it was a tree stump, it's actually an old bucket. So yeah, this is like 7:45 on the Tuesday evening. And yeah, I just figured this would be a good spot to get some traffic. Unfortunately it's silty, it's not really a clear spot. But the last time I was down for test 18, they seemed to be inclined to cruise along the edge of the kind of surface weed. So yeah, we put the camera in Tuesday night. You can see there's some pellet there in the background that I dropped on Tuesday night. Probably should have put some corn on that spot, but it wasn't until Wednesday morning that I went out with the bait boat. You can see here, dropped I think around about a kilo to a kilo and a half of pellet and corn kind of all over the spot. Now what you're looking at here is a 360 image. Alright, this is where this differs. There you can see all the pellet and corn on the spot. This is now at 10:15 on the Wednesday morning, and that was the first fish starting to come in and have a little feed on that pellet and corn. So yeah, basically what we've got here is 4 cameras. I'm going to zoom the camera in and crop it a little bit because most of the action, you can see that the bait is spread across like 3 cameras. So we're looking north, east, south and west all at the same time, and those cameras are stitched together to form one major image. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to crop it in to maybe, you know, like 270 degrees, because between the weed on the right and where the camera's positioned, there was pretty much no action. There was no filming, there was no real bait there. So if I crop that in, it'll allow us to almost zoom in a little bit and lose some of the blackness at the top. Alright, that bit at the top there is there to kind of kill the reflections. Unfortunately the lake was very shallow, so we're probably in about 2.5 foot. But you can see the silt all getting kicked up there. That's probably the only fish that came between the camera and the weed bed. But yeah, it probably took them, certainly Wednesday morning, it took them a few hours to start to grow in confidence around that kind of baited spot. And what I found was the bait that was getting cleared up first was definitely coming from the left hand side. It seemed like the fish were coming in from that angle in a lot of cases. Right, as I say, that 2 fish come in from the right hand side, but yeah, I would say 90% of the fish came from the left. That big common there, I think is the second biggest fish in the lake. So to give you perspective on size, I think that fish is kind of mid 20, 26. I think the big one's 28. It was in the swim quite a lot. I think that one's maybe a pound or 2 pounds smaller. But yeah, we're now at, so this is 10:30 Wednesday morning. These clips are all, you know, probably 5-10 minutes apart. But what was interesting about this was that the fish were coming in, having a mouthful and gone. Coming back 5-10 minutes later, having a mouthful, gone. Different fish coming in, having a mouthful, gone. It certainly took a few hours before a few of the fish started to proper smash up the spot, but because they were feeding in that way, it actually majorly helped, because we could see the mouthful. And you know, filming in silt, underwater filming in silt doesn't really work, but because of the nature of how they were feeding, where they were just having a mouthful and off, it's when they were kicking their fins that you were getting the major silt plumes. And you'll see it later on where sometimes it's like a tsunami of silt just coming towards the camera. So yeah, this is us now moving on to around about, so this is like 10 to 11 in the morning. I didn't have any rigs out there in front of it, you know, it was just a case of trying to showcase fish feeding in front of the silt. And yeah, I certainly proved that on this trip. Probably around about 100 different clips we've got here, some better than others, some fish closer than others. And it was only really the last hour that I kind of got bullied into putting a rig out, but by which point I think the fish had smashed pretty much most of the bait. At the start, for the first half of the day, it was only pellet and corn, and then I put the boilies in, but by the time I put the boilies in, the traffic had definitely died down, so I should probably have put the boilies in just before the pellet and corn kind of ran out, to keep the fish interested. But certainly when I put the boilies in, it seemed to be more the commons that were getting in about the boilies. The big common tarka was certainly fond of the 20mm krill boilies that I put in. As we see 3 fish just cruising over. At this point I think they're still nervous about the camera and the spot. I don't know if they're more nervous about there being a potential rig on the spot, or if they're just curious about what's going on with the camera. But yeah, within 3 or 4 hours on Wednesday morning, they were basically ignoring the camera, and I ended up with fish feeding like an inch away from the camera. So I'm going to let this play out, and I'll jump back in with some commentary and let you know later on some of the updates, what I've done on the spot. But yeah, let this play out and you can hopefully see some more of the fish. 19, and yeah, this is probably when the swim was most kind of active. We're getting 2s, 3s coming in, pretty regular. 1 or 2 mouthfuls, and then obviously the silt kicking up. So visibility wasn't great at this point. Obviously my plan is not to be, well, hopefully ever filming in silt, but it was just a cool thing to see because there's very limited footage out there. But yeah, at this point, by this point, you can see all the bait on the left hand side is gone, and I don't really think that's anything to do with the camera. I think that's more just to do with the fact that that was the area they were coming in from, and that was the first bit of bait they would see. So most of the bait on the left is gone. Patch in the middle is still here. Now what's interesting is this is test 19, but in test 18 these 2 buggers come in, right? Or one. This is one of them. There's 2 catfish in the lake. One that's 19 pounds, one's 22 pounds. And the last time I was doing testing, they came in and just smashed the spot to pieces. And you know, I just think because of the size of them, they were kicking up a lot of silt. Now, one of the problems with the catfish is stitching the cameras together is really difficult. You'll see the whiskers are not perfectly stitched, and yeah, it's really difficult to get these stitches perfect. So you will see a slight discrepancy. It'll actually show you the difference on the angle of the cameras as well. It'll show you, it's quite obvious where the stitching points are when this catfish comes in. But last time they 2 just demolished the spot, and I wasn't seeing a great deal. Certainly on this visit, you know, I think the catfish was, yeah, it was just curious. Didn't really eat. I didn't see it have a mouthful, but it was just up, you know, looking at the camera, you know, flicking its whiskers off the camera, and at one point I thought it was going to eat the camera. So yeah, at this point, as I say, this is 20 past 12. I was dreading the fact that this catfish was in the swim, because I thought if that catfish starts smashing up the spot, just because of the sheer size of it, I ain't going to see anything for an hour or so, because that's what happened on the last test. Luckily, yeah, it does a little 180 here, comes back, comes right up to the centre camera, has a little pose. Look at it poking its whiskers off the lenses, and then yeah, luckily it shoots off and doesn't come back. But it was good to get it on film. But yeah, again, you can see that there's a lot of silt kind of kicking up. What I would say is, you know, at this point, I'd say probably about half the bait was gone. And as we come into that kind of early afternoon, as we see one of the big comments in, I would say that at this point what we done was actually put boilies in later on. I probably should have started to introduce some boilies just now while there was a lot of traffic, because I would say that I let the bait dwindle down and dwindle down and dwindle down. I think most of the fish that had been in feed, maybe they had a feed and they were switched off and they weren't looking for any more food, or maybe it was just because the spot was dwindling that they went elsewhere. But this next clip, we're now, yeah, so the catfish was in at 20 past 12. This is 20 minutes later, and you can see how much it's settled. You know, the feeding activity dropped a little bit. These fish then come in. That orange mirror was such a confident eater. This little common was in the swim for about 6 or 7 hours from this point, and he just kept eating. That orange mirror and that little common were, yeah, what I would call grubbers. The next shot, the orange mirror was probably the most confident in front of the camera, come right up real close. And what was good is, obviously, as the bait dwindled in the kind of middle of the swim, in the middle of the shot, it meant that, you know, the fish did have to get closer and closer. The common came right up to roughly the same range as that orange mirror, but that bait that fish is eating now is basically on the base plate of the camera. It's probably, that fish is probably 4 inches away from the lenses of the camera. and it's quite difficult to stitch the fish when they're that close. But that orange miller certainly was one of the very few fish that was, you know, having a mouthful, and I think that fish is around about £13, which is the biggest of the 3 orange mirrors that are in there. But I think that fish is going to go big because, yeah, it certainly likes to feed. In terms of time, we are now at, where are we? Yeah, so this is now going on. This next clip is half an hour further on, so we're now going on to 1:20. And you can see there is clips. There has been feeding in between these spots, but you know, either it's just been there's too much silt, or it's not a great shot, or the fish was facing the wrong way, or whatever. I'm not putting in every single shot or every single time that a fish was in the swim, but you can see there's quite a lot of bait gone now, as our friend Carrots is back in for another nosy. And again, you'll see this fish has multiple mouthfuls and just clearly isn't camera shy. Now, one thing to talk about here is the actual lighting. You'll see that the lighting is way too bright here, and this is one of the things that I made a mistake with, is that like when the silt smashes over the camera, you've got to make the image brighter in order to try and attempt to see through it, but then the second it dies it's too bright and you've got to dull it down. So again, this is just a learning curve where I need to be switched on to that. You know, sometimes obviously I'm in the bivvy, I'm on my own, you know, at this point I might be away doing a piss or whatever, and then you come back and you go, oh shit, I need to drop that light levels down. So you'll see in the next shot, or the next 2 shots, you know, I've fixed that there, that's it back to normal. So as the comment comes in, yeah, at this point here the bait should have been in, the boilies should have been in the swim at this point, because there was definitely a noticeable drop in traffic. This is a great shot to show you the 360 filming, right? It's very difficult to stitch this because I've got to stitch all 4 and try and get them perfect, which are not absolutely perfect, but it's reasonably close. So this fish at the moment that looks like it's going right to left, right to left, right to left, that fish is doing donuts around about the camera. That fish is swimming in a circle around the camera. Alright, and it's when I filmed at Kingfisher about 6 months ago, that's what a lot of the fish were doing, was just doing donuts around about the camera. So yeah, as we see common coming in, and again this one is not shy either, and there's the major silt plume, and this is, yeah, this is us going on to, where are we, when are we? Yeah, so this is where there was a noticeable drop in traffic. So that shot there, 3:05, was in, nothing happened for around about 35 minutes, and then yeah, they just come in and smashed the lake to pieces. Like 4 or 5 of them just smashed the swim to pieces, as we see a fish moving over the camera. And yeah, it was when they all have a go like that in the silt, it's difficult to see a lot. So this was about 10 minutes later. One of the problems was I was waiting for the silt to settle before I baited up, and because they were coming in, having it, coming in, having it, coming in, having it, or even just coming in, disturbing the bottom, I eventually got some boilies in. I think off the top of my head I maybe dropped about, I don't know, maybe about 30 boilies. Some of them are at the back of the shot, just out of sight, just in line with the bucket, at that kind of fire escape, as I call it, that kind of route out, just to the right of the backweed. So yeah, I put in about maybe 30 krill boilies, little handful of pellet that you'll see just dropping from a bait boat there. And what's interesting is, yeah, at this point here, I would say that it was mainly the commons that were coming in, but our little friend Carrots came in pretty quick, and yeah, I would say that most of the fish that had the boilies, it was like, yeah, it was like one boilie and then away, one boilie away, one boilie away, pretty consistently. This next part of the show is the Tarka show. So this is our resident big fish, and for the next hour or so I've got about 10 shots of this fish just coming in, grabbing a pellet, a boilie, 2 boilies, and then off. So for everyone that wants to catch the fish, 20mm krill and 20mm krill bottom baits, and yeah, that fish always seemed to come in, grab one away, grab one away. My first shot was 4 minutes past 4, that's 80 minutes past 4, this is now 25 to 5. It was pretty consistently visiting and just grabbing a boilie and then off. This is us now moving on. So those boilies went in at 4:45. This is now 4:45, and the small common was in. I've not actually stitched that well there on the left hand side. I could have stitched that better. Yeah, and again, yeah, this little common was in the swim. Once the boilies went in, it was in pretty consistently, you know, every half an hour, having a boilie or two and away. That's 4:45. We're now moving on to 10:06, and again, a good friend, the little common. You can see how much clearer the spot's getting just with how little traffic there is. So if I was filming on gravel, this is the clarity that I would get, this is the sharpness that I would get. Yeah, and what's interesting as well is that the right hand side, the left hand side of the camera is pretty clean, whereas the right hand side is pretty dirty, and the reason for that is basically because there wasn't any fish there. So the fish are actually acting as like self-cleaning for the camera. Alright, you can see a little couple of speckles of silt, but because of the nature and the curvature of the actual system, most of that dirt is at the kind of top, so we can still see down on the lake bed without there's nothing in front of that. That camera has not been cleaned, and it's been in 2 days, do you know what I mean? So as we see, yeah, a little common in. The mirror, didn't see many mirrors once the boilies went in, but yeah, we're coming in. I think there was still bait in there, like on the left hand side there, you can just see what looks like, I'm not sure if that's boilies or little bits of pellet that are actually covered in silt, but they were certainly still digging about the silt even after it appeared that all them pellets and corn were gone. So, but yeah, this is us. We are now at what time are we at? This is 6:05, and at this point, Dave, who owns the lake, is like texting me, like, I obviously send him some photos and kind of low resolution kind of clips, and Dave's like, get a fucking rig in that water, get a rig in. He's desperate to see a fish getting hooked. So yeah, so what I decided to do was drop another few boilies and put a rig in. So I've done well recently on little white Ronnies with or little Ronnie rigs with white sent from Hells, kind of trimmed down rather than putting putty or weights or anything on, just trimming it down. Almost looks like a little tiny bit of like bread. Those sent from Hells are buoyant as hell, so you end up cutting about half of them off. So you can see at the back of the shot here, just in line with the weed, the little white pop up, and ideally I should have dropped the hook bait where them boilies were, because yeah, the fish just kept coming in and basically going on the line of that bait, and it was kind of like they come in from the left passageway and then would go out the back passageway in between the bucket and the weed, or vice versa. And I think that little hook bait was just ever so slightly, it wasn't really in line with any of those passageways. Do you know what I mean? It was like if the fish come in from the left, then that hook bait was maybe 3 feet to the left of them. If they come in from the back door, then the hook bait was 2 or 3 foot to the right of them. So in theory, or in hindsight, I probably should have just tweaked the lead back and pulled the rig back. As I said, like that fish there, you seen, just came right over the top of it, and didn't really see it. But at this point, it's now starting to get, not starting to get dark, but it's certainly, there's a lot less kind of daylight, sunlight now. It's 10 to 8, so sun was a lot lower in the sky. There was a lot less traffic. The water Clarity was a little bit better. As we see, this common comes in, misses the boilie next to the camera, seems to spook off, but I'm sure it was like 5 minutes later the fish kind of came back in. You can see there's a few krill boilies just to the left of the bucket, and I think it hoovers up, yeah, 1 or 2 of them, and then I'm not sure if it's this shot with the fish, and that's me. You can just see the brightness going up there. That's just me changing the settings in the camera as the spot gets darker and darker. You know, I can film right up to, I didn't actually keep filming. I stopped filming at like 9 o'clock or something, but I could have kept filming longer. But it starts to get grainy as you increase the light, to compensate for the lack of daylight. Yeah, it's that the quality of the footage isn't as good. It starts to kind of grain out that last kind of half hour to an hour. But yeah, see, fish comes in at the back of the spot here, and then I think it comes right up, or the common I think comes right up. You can see I've not stitched that properly at the back of the shot there, and that's because I've had to try and stitch it properly down here. And you see the fish comes in and grabs that boilie that it spied earlier on, and then decides to clean the camera for me, which was lovely. And then the final shot here, which I just missed the start of, but I've just put it in twice, is the big common just missing the hook bait. I'll put that in again just so you can see it. That's probably as close as I came to the bite, and that was with the biggest fish in the lake. So anyway, just to recap, guys, thanks very much for watching, and I will hopefully be getting some more content for you guys soon. Cheers.